Greetings, ladies and milligents, and welcome to this latest edition of HFY, where I take old stories I've narrated and update them to modern audio standards. This particular story is called How Diplomatic, written by daeomec. The alien invasion couldn't wait till the end of the year. I was 2 months away from a cushy ambassadorship in a resort world. 2 months. But no, the crazy bastards had to start their plan for galactic domination just before I retired. Which was why I'd been woken up at 2 in the morning by blaring sirens and a military escort. Wonderful. The assistant secretary said the stern-faced soldier. Normally, young people in my bedroom were cause for celebration, but I had a feeling that he wouldn't take kindly to the proposition. There's an emergency. Well, isn't that nice? I hadn't guessed at all. I stumbled out of bed and grabbed my fuzzy bathrobe. Now give me a moment to change. There's no time. Come this way. Thus, I was manhandled out of my quarters and shoved into a nice armored vehicle. So, I drawled out, wrinkling my nose in the grey interior of the car. What's the emergency? He didn't respond. At this point, the sleep had mostly left me, and the nerves were beginning to kick in. If the cookie-cutter soldiers, ones that were different from the usual bodyguards, were refusing to share even gossip, then it was more serious than I'd thought. I shifted in place. The Wim/Ernov haven't actually attacked, have they? The Wim/Ernov, a group of psychopathic alien warlords, had quickly burned their way across the known galaxy. The Goycht and the North Central Confederation had already fallen, but there were a few more civilizations between them and us. At least, there had been a few more civilizations between us. As expected, the soldiers didn't respond. We soon arrived at the planetary military base, and I was again manhandled through the dusty hallways and to a very tense-looking war room. Assistant Secretary Lucia Weber sneered the brass-covered man at the front of the room. Thank you for joining us. He looked my fuzzy robe up and down, and his frown grew bigger. I appreciate it, General Collins. I snagged a coffee from the terrified baby intern. What's going on? I took my seat next to my colleague Vasilev, the Assistant Secretary for Political Military Affairs. He grunted at me, and I grunted back. The Oyi Republic has fallen. Our ambassador has been taken hostage, and they have already declared war on us. The general looked unexpectedly solemn. The worst-case scenario has been realized. The women Ernahov are likely to attack humanity in less than a week. My head snapped back to the front of the room at that. Well, fuck. Everyone had erupted into a cacophony. We should declare war, declared one over-enthusiastic colonel. Are you crazy? Vasilev shouted back. He'd had enough coffee to make him talkative. They'll eat us alive. The Wenin Ernahov military capability is more than 10 times ours. I flipped through the dossier on the Wenin Ernahov, but I didn't find anything new. Probably because I'd written it. I'd spent the last few months frantically gathering information on them, and everything I'd learned had led me to one conclusion. The Wenin Ernahov were in some ways similar to humans, except that they were way more terrifying. Exceptionally terrifying. If I was to take my deepest, darkest nightmare and stick on the steroids, it still wouldn't be as scary as the Wenin Ernahov. 15 feet tall, incredibly fast, incredibly strong, with claws, venom, and teeth that would make a saber-toothed tiger weep. They were lethal killing machines. Their homeworld was the definition of a death world, but that wasn't the worst of it. It was actually pretty par for the universe. What made the Wenin Ernahov scary was the fact that they were smart. All of their intellect had been focused into one thing: war. Us humans might have written the art of war, but their children could come up with tactics that would put Sun Tzu to shame. Even worse, their weaponry was crazy advanced. As I said, they were like us. The Wenin Ernahov had nukes before they had spaceflight. Actually, they had antimatter weaponry before they had spaceflight. Hell, they didn't even have spaceflight until the Goycht was stupid enough to give them some. Goycht. They always did have their heads up their 15 asses. It's a miracle they hadn't fallen to natural selection sooner. The Wenin Ernahov took to the stars like a shark to water. and they immediately began eating all the little fish in the ocean. And we are next. For once in our existence, the smartest minds of humanity, military people, diplomats, and scientists alike, all agreed on one thing. We were utterly and royally fucked. The argument had died down. Some stared blankly, others fidgeted in place, and a few were crying. "So what do we do now?" murmured the same coffeeless intern, voice quavering. I closed the file. "We could try negotiating." That ended the stupor. Everyone began talking all at once, some in favor, some not. Vasilev, who was in vehement agreement, was just about to throw his mug across the room, while the colonel looked about ready to have an aneurysm. The general laughed in a booming voice cutting through the noise. "We might as well," he mused, voice thick with dark humor. "We don't have many other options. Well, Madam Secretary, I'm sure you'd appreciate leading the delegation, unless there's any objections." He looked around the room, and I did too. I tried to catch the eye of my boss, but he was studiously looking in the other direction. Coward. I gritted my teeth. Sure, why not? Damn, I just postponed my retirement, hadn't I? "They're gonna kill us! They're gonna eat us all!" Ambassador Araz started screaming incoherently as several Oyi were ripped apart. "We have to I snapped my fingers and the recording stopped. "Well," I said mildly, "that's what's at stake. Unless you want to be the next poor fools that'll killed in as an example, then we'd better study the crap out of them. We've negotiated good deals before. There's no reason we can't do it again." Other than the fact that they are a bloodthirsty, violent race that rampage through unknown galactic civilizations, the colonel scoffed. "I doubt that asking them nicely will keep the Wenma and Nahab from killing us." I shrugged. Has anyone tried? Everyone was silent for a moment. "Well," said Vasilov slowly, "the Gojit gave them spaceships and tried to make them slaves. Then the Wenman and Nahab slaughtered them all and made them slaves." I frowned. The North Central Confederation declared war on them immediately after, since they were allies with the Gojit. The Oye ruling council fled, and there was no government capable of negotiating when the Wenman and Nahab showed up, piped in the intern. We stared at each other. Even the war-hungry colonel seemed thoughtful. "There's no harm in trying," I said finally. "It's not like we can make things worse." I clapped my hands, feeling hopeful for the first time since the morning. "We have 7 days before they arrive. All right, team, let's get to work." My team and I had used the week to study everything about the Wenman and Nahab. What they needed, what they ate, what they liked, everything. We'd pieced together their language and customs from their videos. And every single person on that delegation was fluent in Wenman or Nahabese by the time we landed on their mothership. The human treatment, as I liked to call it, was standard course for whenever we encountered a new alien species. This time, we did it with a little more desperation than usual. Know your enemy, am I right? After our tiny, unarmed shuttle landed in the enormous Wenman Nahab mothership, we were roughly grabbed and shoved to the grand greeting room of their warlord. The man bared his fangs at us, jutting his lower jaw at us. I suddenly knew how prey species felt when we smiled at them. "Weak, not strong humans," rumbled the warlord. "We'll be received with peace, not danger, but for little, not long. Why would we treat you with mercy, not war?" The Wenman Nahab spoke with a language of opposites. Almost every adjective and the occasional noun was accompanied by the negation of its antonym, hence the slashes. It was weird, but whatever. Chinese was harder to learn. I simplified the dialogue for a little convenience, not too much, but because, fuck you, suffer along with me. I stuck out my own lower jaw, feeling stupid and uncomfortable, and tilted my head back to expose my neck. Slowly, I sunk to my knees, and the members of my delegation did the same. "Oh, merciful, not cruel warlord," I simpered back, taking care to growl the words. "Your honor, not shame, displays your intellect, not stupidity. Hence we come to you, crouched down like weak, not strong creatures we are. Will you deign to share drink and bread, so that we may discuss the terms, not demands, of our joining, not war. I'd used the ritual opening that their weaker tribes used when joining a stronger one. It was a gamble, since I'd stolen this from one of the Wenman Ernahov's TV shows. The warlord stared at us for a moment. Then he began stamping his feet against his chair, hooting with what I hoped was glee, or at least amusement. These weak, not strong humans know where they stand. Welcome, not threat, and eat, so we may discuss your joining, not war. The next night, I called the president from the Wenman Ernahov's ship, trying to ignore my fierce hangover. Hello, I mumbled into the long-distance comms. Madam President, we've come to an agreement with the Wenman Ernahov. The president's normally frosty tone was taut with apprehension. Well, what are their terms? We aren't going to war, are we? No, thankfully, they've agreed to accept a peaceful, non-violent surrender. What do they want? Disarmament? Said a different, raspy voice. Ah, so it was a conference call. Lovely. With the pounding on my head, I'd have difficulty distinguishing the voices. I shook my head, forgetting that they couldn't see me. No, I replied belatedly. We can keep our weapons. New leadership, the president, or the general, didn't sound happy, which made sense considering that she'd be the one to lose out. Don't worry, Madam President, you can keep your job. The rest of you can too. My boss spoke up now, his high-pitched voice cut right through the fog in my head. We aren't slaves, are we? Don't tell me that we're going to go the way of the Gojit. I couldn't help the smug smile. Nope, we retain our planet and our freedom. Then, what are the terms? Snapped the president. Well, I may have pushed it a little too far. I decided to take pity and tell them everything. I'd be a little tense too if I didn't know the fate of my species. We're vassals. We'll pay tribute to the Wenman Ernahov every year for a decade, and then we're raised to full clan status, which means equal rights for us in the multiple eyes of the Wenman Ernahov. A short silence. That's it. What's the catch? What do they want for tribute? The general seemed a bit skeptical. Well, really skeptical. I didn't really blame him. If I hadn't lived it myself, I wouldn't have believed it. A bit of money and natural resources, I yawned, still exhausted from last night. If there was one thing that the Wenman Ernahov did better than warmongering, it was partying. The deal they gave us is standard for Wenman Ernahov vassal clans. They'd normally ask for soldiers too, but they want something different from us. I paused for dramatic effect, which was ruined by my second yawn. The people on the other end weren't as amused, but I just saved humanity. Sue me. What is it? Said my boss, resigned to my attitude. They want us to be their ambassadors and negotiate with their governments and species for surrender. Apparently, most species are too intimidated to properly talk with the Wenman Ernahov, and we seem to have a knack for it. They were really impressed by us. Hell, they were really impressed by Ambassador Aros, despite the whole screaming thing. He's on the ship, you know. Another silence. Man, I was on a roll. You're telling me that they gave us the really phenomenal deal because they were impressed by how we surrendered, the president said slowly. Of course. Why wouldn't they? I smiled. We asked nicely. End of story. I would just like to thank the T5 supporters. Bushmaster 117, Casper Arnholtz, Draxzoon WRE, Elijah Silvercross, Gray, John Carrington, and Severin Cerberus. Thank you very much.